Welcome, apprentices, to the Arcane Archive, your best source for knowledge and information on the vast, ever-expanding omniverse that your little greedy hearts just yearn to hoard. We are so glad to see all of you for this week's session of our Denizens of the Plains discussion, where we'll be checking back in on our brothers from another dimensional mother. You know what I'm saying. Yes, that is correct, apprentices. Today, we will be returning to our discussion on the Elves of the Forgotten Realms. Now, if you haven't already, I would highly suggest that you go back and review Lesson 1 of our DOTP discussion on the Elves of the Forgotten Realms. It's incredibly convenient to reference, as we have not only recorded the entire session to paper, but also within the memory crystals you were all given upon your admission to the archive. These crystals are quite nifty and helpful, for they record all that is said and experienced of relevance on whatever topic we will be talking about during that class. So, if you ever require a refresher, before or after, not during, you may do so with the crystals. Well then, with that, I do believe we are ready to dive back into the archive on the Elves of the Forgotten Realms.
Now, do you want to tell them what horrible place you dragged me to, or should I?
I mean, if you would like to lead, by all means, Elias, please.
All right, everyone. Well, we'll talk about the first place we went to. We ended up in the underdark at first.
Indeed. And the incredible city of Minzo Branzan!
Yes, Alastor had this wondrous idea of, it did end up working out.
As all of my plans and ideas always do.
Wasn't
flawlessly, I might add.
I mean, we spent quite a long time down there. Now, if none of you have encountered the Dark Elves or the Drow before, they're not exactly the friendliest of people in this dimension. Specifically. Let's just say our best way in was we got captured.
I mean, captured, is being a little extreme. We gifted ourselves to them. You see, apprentices, in our journeys and explorations of the realms of the Forgotten Lands, we realized very quickly that the Drow, or otherwise known as Dark Elves, are a race of elves that are quite feared and hated on the surface world. They are a particular offshoot of the elves of that world that apparently follow a rather dark and evil deity by the name of Lolth. You remember her. We talked a little bit about her in the first session. Remember, seriously, you should go back and reference that if you haven't already. But yes, essentially, when the primal elves chose to take the forms of mortals, they were one people split by conflicting loyalty to gods who reviled each other. The schism led to a conflict that ended with Lolth, remember, retreating to the Abyss and her adherents exiled to the Underdark. And this banishment enabled the victors to once again live in peace on Arvandor, but did nothing to heal the rift. The vanquished elves weren't seen or heard from again for centuries. And throughout that age of residing in the darkness, absorbing the unhealthy emanations of the Underdark, subsisting on its tainted water and food, and always beseeching their god for guidance and following her poisonous dictates, Lolth's worshippers gradually transformed into the Drow, a cruel, predatory, and wicked offshoot of the elf race.
Yes, and the first time we visited, talking to the more, just the nicer, better hosted, the rest of the elves on the surface, and we did a little digging into their history. We talked a little bit about the Crown Wars in the last class. I guess at some point the Dark Elves were on the surface for a time, and then they ended up having to retreat into the Underdark
once more.
There were a couple battles, lots of animosity, so they took themselves out of the equation, driven down into the Underdark. And at this point in their society, they are known for that cruelty and
hatred.
Yeah, evil. This drive
For the vast majority, yes. Not all.
Not all of them. This is not a blanket statement.
No.
It's in fact, actually, later on when we talk about kind of our own experience, there were some very nice people I did meet down there.
There were, actually.
But it was this drive to dominate as a race that really drove the service world to be so afraid of them.
It's true.
Many of these service people believed that all Drow were beings of inherent and irredeemable evil. In truth, and at least in our experience, most Drow do align with that evil, engaging in torture, slavery, murder, and other nefarious activities in the name of their demon goddess.
This is true. There was a lot of demon goddess worshipping.
Yes,
a lot of pretty.
I have to say, their art was quite interesting.
It was honestly. I'm gonna say it. It was exquisite.
It was
quite
well
exquisite.
done. I mean, very
graphic.
Yes.
Very
Gory,
graphic, and you know,
there was a weird serenity in it that I can appreciate.
a lot of sexuality too going on, which I was a fan of. I didn't mind that aspect at all. The accompanying pain and torture aspects of it, though, I was not a huge fan of. Like, you know, that's not my kink. You know, if it's yours, I don't mind that. Like I said, like we always say here at the Arcane Archive, no kink shame, but no kink sane. You know?
Yes.
Nothing wrong with that.
You know, this is kind of reflected in the way that they kind of treat their own people.
Right.
Almost always in their society, Dark Elves who reject the ways of their people are exiled or executed for being rebels, heretics, and insurrectionists who have turned against Drow culture and the will of Lolth.
Yeah, it's a big no-no for them.
Mm-hmm.
No defying Lolth.
We saw some of this.
We did. We did see in our time there a number of potential.
Executions.
Yeah, a lot of executions actually. They do that kind of almost as just a fun pastime. But a lot of people attempting to escape, or at least a hearsay of them escaping off into the underdark tunnels, of which they are, from what we were told, very unlikely to survive, if at all.
We did hear, kind of before we ended up down there were a couple of Drow within the Forgotten Realms history.
It's true. Yes. No. Very
self-sacrificing Drow who left. I didn't quite catch their names. They're kind of
I believe they were known as Lyriel Binary and Dritzt du Urten.
That was the one who was talked about more, definitely.
Yes. No. The latter was definitely far more famous. At least, certainly in the surface. Dwellings.
I'm so more infamous in the, not a whole lot about
Yeah, no, in fact, many people who did even speak their name usually were silenced most violently so.
Yes.
So we refrained from doing that ourselves very much, or bringing it up.
The interesting thing it shows that this evil that a lot of people consider innate is not, and it can be overcome.
Indeed.
The actions of these few heroic Drow have tempered some people's opinion toward the race, although the appearance of a Dark Elf on the surface still remains a rare event and a cause for alarm. Now, that was what we were told,
yes.
And I dare to say it's pretty damn accurate.
I feel like, unfortunately, a lot of the negative viewpoints and connotations that are associated with the Drow as a whole are more than well earned, primarily, which is unfortunate, because, again, I do love to bring up, there are exceptions to every rule, apprentices. This is the first thing on any kind of information or historical gathering that you will ever go on. You must always remember, there's always an exception to the rule. For instance, many Drow in Faerun hailed from Minzobaranzan, as that was the city that me and Elias primarily got most of our research from. It is known as the infamous City of Spiders. But there are also other Drow city-states in the Underdark, such as Jachalkin, or Chednasad. That sounds like a weird, strange high school guy.
I'll be honest, I wrote all these down and I still don't know how to say them. So
Chednasad. Oh, thank you. So
I feel like I met a Chednasad.
That's what I'm saying. It feels like it's like some douchey guy from high school that you really had to stand up to at one point, who gave you wedgies and 3 in a locker or gave you a swirly.
Did you read my old scroll? Never mind.
Anywho, Dark Elves encountered on the surface are usually found near entrances to the Underdark, because a lot of them are harmed by the light of day, which weakens them and their magic. Drow who become adventurers often do so after fleeing the oppressive, cruel theocracy of the city-states, and most of these individuals live as outcasts and wanderers, though a rare few find new homes with another race or culture.
That was how we got our connection in. We went to one of the larger, bustling cities of Forgotten Realms, and we found a couple of Dark Elves and just started asking questions, and eventually ended up with a loose direction, which was helpful.
It was.
I will say, though, bringing it up to those people, they were not happy with us at first.
No, I think a lot of them would rather prefer to leave that
And never
part of their
think about
lives.
it again,
Yeah,
yes.
in the past, never to be brought up at all. It was very insensitive of you, Elias, to do so, just right to
Me?
their faces like that.
That-
Yes, no, you should really think about how you approach people from this point forward, honestly. But anywho, from time to time, they are old enough to understand. Drow are taught that they are superior to all other creatures, for they remain steadfast in their devotion to Lolth, despite the hardships of their existence. Any creature that isn't a Drow is useful only as a sacrifice to Lolth, as a slave, or as fodder for the giant spiders that the Drow train to patrol their cities and tunnels. There were a lot of those down there, for sure. They like their spiders. I guess that's why it's called the infamous City of Spiders. I thought it was probably just like a metaphor, but no, it's pretty literal.
Where they had me for most of our quite wonderful stay, there was a lot of them. I thought I was going to be eaten. They wouldn't have been able to, of course. But
Yes, no, of course.
we played our hand.
We were safe. We were safe the whole time.
We could have gotten that.
We were just playing them for fools. We were in no way, shape, or form at the whims or behest of their, horrible machinations. We were always safe, apprentices.
Always safe.
Always. 100% safe. What happened to that other fellow who went with us? Tiberius, right?
No,
Did he make it out?
I don't remember his name personally.
Oh, no, that's fair, I suppose.
I
I'm
don't-
sure he's fine.
I doubt it.
I'm sure he's fine. I remember him, like, he was our guide. Like, he was the one that was like, yes, I'll go along with you. And we'll all have this amazing time, and we'll be friends. And I confess, I did not see much of him after we got captured.
either.
Like, because I was taken to, like, the higher echelons. I was
Yes.
trying to rubbing shoulders with some of the matrons and the like. Well, more like they were rubbing their feet on me. But still, I still rubbed against them in one form or another. I think that counts.
It doesn't, but I was in a work camp of sorts, and
really disagree.
we got separated, and I never saw him again, and so that I don't.
Yes.
We might have to check on that.
I'm sure he's fine.
Yeah, he's
Continuing
probably
on.
fine. We got out.
Yes,
That's
we got
the
out, and I'm sure he got out too.
He got his money. It's really not a big deal.
Among these other lesser forms of life, the elves that live in sunlight are especially despised. Oh, I can attest to that. Because they are descended from the primal elves who betrayed Lolth so long ago. Yes, we do look a little bit more like the elves in sunlight, so honestly, we were, at one point it was a weird kind of dichotomy. It was like we were the most hated and reviled. I can't tell you how many times they spit on me. Joke's on them, I'm kind of into that. But regardless, the point being was, they seriously still wanted to they wanted to present me, or at least the house that we were sold to, wanted to present me as a
Treasure?
a prize, a trophy,
Well,
as
you
it
were
were.
kind of an achievement.
Sure,
We literally walked right in.
Yes, we did, and we presented ourselves, and they were more than happy to take us, cuff us, put collars around our necks, lash us with whips every once in a
Take all of
while.
our stuff.
Yeah, they
That's
took our
really
stuff.
Luckily, I had my hidden notebook and quill.
No,
I did my-
no. We made sure not to have any of our most expensive, most important items and equipment, of course. This isn't our first rodeo of being indentured servants, all right? Or no, well, slaves. But still.
It was mine. You've done this, but never mind.
Absolutely, I have. What? You've never been a slave before? Come now, Elias. Get with the program.
How many lifetimes have
And you
you
call-
spent behold?
You call yourself a professional researcher. Good lord, you're embarrassing me in front of the acolytes. Anywho, so,
Please don't encourage them to try this.
first, they accepted Lolth's offer of mortality in return for destiny. But then they turned against her in a pathetic effort to win back Coralon's favor. Drow view the elves of the surface world as cowardly children who defy their parents when they're not around, but cower in the corner when their parents return, terrified of having their bad behavior found out.
Yeah. And this kind of shows in its own way in Drow society that we saw. The reverence for Lolth is, it is in every aspect of their life.
Oh, it's absolutely...
They constantly watch for signs of her favor. Any incident or physical feature can be interpreted as a sign. And the priestesses are quick to attach meanings and obscure omens that benefit their own interests. Lots of...
Oh yeah, no, it
vying for
was
some sort of-
extremely zealot behavior, to be certain. Unlike most other gods from what we were able to ascertain, who are still relatively prevalent and present, Lulth takes a much more personal, take and effect on her people.
Yeah.
And it shows in both their fear and reverence for her.
I mean, aside from the constant violence, that was probably that was the most prevalent thing.
Oh, absolutely. And it is because of this that all this effort that the Drow do to please Lulth is a wise precaution. Though she resides in the Abyss, the Spider Queen, as I said, is not a distant god. She sometimes tests her most faithful by drawing their spirits to her in the demon web pits to undergo her judgment. Followers never know when or if they are to be tested, and one who claims to have undergone the test and passed it is rewarded with respect and elevated status. However, even someone who successfully lies about having taken the test can also earn the respect of their peers, since perpetrating this falsehood is a way of proving one's worth to Lulth. After all, lying and conniving can't save those who fail the test. However, because the evidence of such an outcome is immediately obvious, a Drow whose spirit has failed its test in the demon web pits becomes transformed into a Dryder. Now, that apparently is a fate worse than death to the Drow. They are apparently, driven out and treated as messiahs, if not outright killed if they... No, they're not killed. I take that back.
Well, they're used in a way.
They are... It depends. They usually like to drive them out from what I learned. But we'll get to that in a moment. When Lulth is well served, however, she rewards her faithful with favors. When she is defied, she visits the underdark in one of her forms and takes a direct hand in punishing the malefactor in a manner that discourages anyone who might be contemplating a similar kind of disobedience. Perhaps making an example of malcontents in this way is simply an aspect of how Lulth's cruel personality works. It also might be evidence of a lesson that she learned all too well from the way Corellon reacted to her betrayal of him. The smallest flame of resistance must be snuffed out before it grows into a conflagration.
Yeah, and, I don't know about your experience with the fellow servants. Mine was quite strange. A lot of the people I interacted with, didn't look at me any more hatefully than anyone else, and even some of them shared some stories with me about their interactions. Now, while you, I guess, played house with some matriarchs, I got stuck in a camp with, the other discarded dregs of Drow society.
Yes.
People of low birth who did not belong to a house in any real way,
or some of the weaker houses that specifically had to cater to the stronger ones to maintain themselves.
It was weird, because as we learned, the principal organization in Drow culture and society is the House, an extended clan that compromises many related families, plus a number of lesser families who have pledged loyalty to the House. The House's membership also includes some number of indentured Drow servants and slaves of other species. Ta-da!
Yes.
That was us.
Yep.
A house usually specializes in a business, a service, or a craft it supports by providing income. Now, I don't know who you were stuck with, but I was stuck with a sort of a mining crafting section of things. I spent a long time swinging a pickaxe, and I've learned something. I'm not very good at it.
Yes, no. Manual labor has never been your forte, my friend.
Yeah.
No offense. Just
No.
very scrawny arms, but
Can I say,
big brain and personality.
it was by design.
Yes.
I had no interest.
That is fair. No,
I did keep their books for a while, though.
Ooh,
once they
nice.
realized I was completely useless,
That's fine.
they figured, oh, look, he can write, and is that a little bit of magic around the ears kind of thing? And
that's fair.
Haven't used my accounting skills in a long time.
Well, I'm sure they were put to fantastic use for them. I, on the other hand, was stuck with some of the more upper echelons. At one point, a particular matron found, I guess, an interest in me, known as Madame Zarathi. She was, as one would expect, quite frankly, I'm not saying this lightly, she was hot as hell. She was super sexy, I'm not gonna lie. Even among, elves and the like, it is kind of well known in that world that Drow, even among elves, stand apart in being particularly attractive and appealing. Which again,
if you're into that.
Even if you're not into that, you still can't help but just, hot is hot, you know what I'm saying? I can't say I appreciated her personality much, but goddamn, dude. Man, the stuff she did to me, boy, it was,
Terrible?
It's hard to say at times, because it was I kind of just zoned out at one point. I really tried my best to kind of mentally check out at certain points.
They have spells for that.
Yes, no, I didn't need them. Didn't need to use a slot for that. Didn't need to use, no. It was a natural feature that I just learned. It was a feat. It was a feat, buddy. Yeah. It was interesting. However, I was able to gain quite a bit of inside information during the times where she was trying to get inside of me. Houses are in constant competition with one another, I'll have you know. She never stopped complaining and moaning about, the other houses' matrons and priestesses and whatnot. They constantly vie for money, for prestige, and more than anything else, for power over others. The surest sign of Lolth's approval, as it were. And no tactic is outside the rules in this ongoing conflict. In fact, raids against another house's outlying property, either it being farming caverns, trade caravans, or hunting parties, are commonplace. Heck, rumors about disloyalty conspiracies with service elves or heresy against Lolth herself are circulated so frequently that no one even knows what to be sure of anymore, and in fact are usually always assumed to be a clever ploy by an enemy house. Assassinations, both by blade and by the use of special drow poisons, are a constant threat. Bodyguards and food tasters are as necessary to the survival of a high-ranking drow as air and water. Can't tell you how many times I saw just a poor sap drop instantly when she had him eat some food. Luckily, I was, spared from such a fate because I offered to be a particularly comfy footstool and rest, and she couldn't risk losing that at any point. Either way, squabbles within a house also occur from time to time as relatives jockey for position. It's a rare occurrence, though far from unknown, for drow to assassinate their own parents or siblings if that's what it takes to create a path for advancement. There was a little bit of that in Madame Zarathi's house for sure. Her daughters also, keen for whatever reason, I guess, to kind of stick it to her mother, tried to, turn me to their favor a bit. I was getting passed around quite a bit, in fact. Bit like a dog, actually.
I'm sorry.
Honestly, people don't realize it, but dogs have it pretty good in some ways. I'm not gonna lie,
There was a part of me that thought, ooh, he went with the higher ranking peoples. I thought that would be better. I'm gonna rescind that idea.
Again, it depends. There's positive, negative. So long as you're able to drop any and all, amounts of your self-respect, your ego and pride, which is a very interesting experience in and of itself. I'm not going to lie. It's interesting being completely separate from any ounce of what you feel to be
self-worth.
Yes, value. Again, like pride, ego. You really do begin to understand and come into contact with yourself.
Yeah, that must have been real hard for you, Alastor.
It was an interesting experience.
We were only there for a couple weeks.
Yeah. Were we?
Oh. Well, I had a little bit of a different experience. Now, this was a little bit entertaining for me. It was kind of like a drama of sorts.
Oh, you can tell. I love those.
Yes. So, obviously me, and after doing that accounting for a little while, I think they realized that I was having... The reason I was doing things so quickly... Well, one, so I didn't get beat.
Yes.
And also so I could get fed.
Yes. Those are important things.
Yes. Well, I had a couple extra quills doing my work with no hands, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
Yeah, I got caught, and they realized I could do magic.
Ooh.
Yeah, not great, but... Yeah, I was used, as a sort of instrument to figure out where people were for a little while. I'm pretty sure if there was a court of law there, I am complicit in 4 or 5 different murders.
Which honestly would probably get you a pretty high standing.
Yeah, honestly.
Yeah.
But it was only within the one family I served, so it was weird. I had 4 different bosses in the 3 weeks that we were down there.
It's strange how that works, isn't it? They just seem to kind of disappear, and then another one shows up, and everybody's perfectly fine.
Yeah, by the end of it, they actually treated me quite well for a slave. But, different experiences.
Yes.
But to speak of this, especially in both of our experiences, all females.
Oh, yes, no. As I was saying...
females being the top figures in
the
Drow
matriarchs rule
Yes.
this place. Females are the top figures in Drow society. At the head of each house is someone who is a shrewd business operator, a skilled tactician, a high priestess of Lolth, and probably also a merciless assassin with blood on her hands. Unlike many other races, female drow are also typically taller and more robust than the males. Can confirm. She picked me up very easily. This held me and cradled me in her arms for a bit. It was soothing, but also terrifying all at once, I'll be honest. It felt like being back in my mother's womb, if my mother's womb was like brandished like an Iron Maiden, you know what I mean?
Oh!
Yeah, with spikes and steel traps all around. But yes, to rise to the top echelons of power, a female must first become a priestess of Lolth. Then, to ascend to the status of high priestess, she must take advantage of powerful connections or craft special alliances. The path to ultimate power in Drow society is never direct and is always paved with death.
Yeah.
Yes.
Speaking of, I guess, more of my experience, the male Drows can advance standing as a combatant, consort, or both. We already know which path Alastor chose to take. I was a weird mix of combatant and laborer, but
Yes.
physical beauty and fitness are highly prized in a male Drow. Those who are especially favored in this regard can earn protection and gifts from their matrons. A few males can attain high status in their society, especially those who serve as mages. But they never overshadow the females of their houses. Even the most intelligent, strong-willed, and devious male will never be more than a second-class citizen in any Drow city or house. That situation will never change as long as Lolth remains their queen.
It's true.
Now, that is interesting, because I felt like I did have like a modicum of respect by the end.
I mean, it honestly depends, really, because quite frankly, in my experience, they literally had, there were a number of male Drow at one point that, the matron of our house, Madame Zarathi, literally, tore apart this one male Drow that she was also competing another female Drow's attention for. They literally would, take turns lashing him to see, which one he decided to go with or who could hurt him the most until he literally just died on the floor there.
Oh.
And then they kind of just tossed his body out for the spiders to eat after that, and she kind of just moved on. It was very brutal, actually. It was rather upsetting overall, but hey, that be how them be, I guess. It's hard to say, really. After a while there, you kind of just, like I said, the whole disconnect from your body kind of thing, you're kind of a ghost. I astral projected a lot that week, those couple of weeks, let me just say. Regardless, it is, in regards to, our whole thing of, becoming slaves and the like, the Drow kept to themselves in their subterranean cities and fortresses. Few other creatures would care. However, the Dark Elves could indulge their evil practices until their caverns were heaped with corpses and awash in blood, so long as they never left. Even the surface elves might be content to overlook their hatred for their kin and leave the Drow alone, as long as they never had lay their eyes on the Drow or view the results of their efforts. But Drow society is predicated on a foundation of terror and slavery. And most desirable slaves live on the world's surface. Humans, dwarves, and best of all, other elves. To the Dark Elves, raiding the surface for captives and treasure isn't just a cultural and military tradition, but also an economic necessity.
Yeah, not a lot of business down there.
At least, not that isn't, the business of killing and lying and stealing.
More of like a commerce. It's not like they'd be trading any materials.
No, because most other creatures and denizens of the Underdark hate the Drow. Most creatures of the Underdark hate each other, usually. Whether it be the Duragar, the Svefneblin, they are not fans of each other, because they're all pretty evil and bad in a lot of ways.
I saw a couple of Duragar in the labor camps.
Oh yeah, no, and also Svefneblin, ironically, was also a rather favored slave of another Drow matriarch.
But they're so little.
I know, but one part of him was not.
Oh.
And it wasn't just the nose, as you might assume. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you saw any of this, but I did get to see one of their raiding parties go out. It was a lot. Some larger raiding parties involve hundreds of warriors, mages, priestesses, giant spiders.
Oh yes, there were a lot of those.
A large enough force to overwhelm a community. The invaders would sweep through towns in the dark of night, shackle their potential slaves into long trains of
Cattell.
Yeah. Kill everyone who resisted, burn everything to the ground, and set their sights on the next town in line. If I did my math correctly, the one raiding party I did get to see looks like they went to at least 4 or 5 small farming villages. It was...
They are rather adept at this particular thing.
It was quick.
It
was really only a couple hours.
It's rather distasteful, but again, this is a big part of their culture, which means they are quite adept at execution of this type of thing. As well as, again, you come in the night, there's not much that can stop a sizable Drow raiding party. You know, it's difficult. Because, in fact, most of the Dark Elves raids, they are small, and they're usually stealthy one-night missions.
Yes, one of the other prisoners did tell me this was an abnormal raid.
Yes, no. They usually do quick guerrilla tactics, because they don't want to stay too long or attract too much attention. The Drow scout their targets in advance and then strike on a night when the moon is new or its light is obscured by thick clouds. And there's a reason for that I found out a little later. We'll talk about that going down a little bit. However, they might kill indiscriminately to spread terror, while other times they slip into a village, knock out their targets with poison, and spirit them away without even waking the neighborhood dogs. Sometimes a raid uses both of these tactics. One squad sets off fires and alarms to focus the defender's attention on the one area, as another team strikes the real target on the other side of town. Loot always seems to be a secondary goal on almost all raids. Taking prisoners is almost always the primary objective, and some of the Dark Elves' victims become slaves, and some end up as food for giant spiders or other monsters the Drow have trained to serve them. And some are laid out across blood-stained altars and sacrificed to Lolth. I saw that on more than one occasion as a footstool, let me tell you. Grim stuff.
Yeah, all of this is.
Yeah.
It was kind of the whole theme of the trip.
A little bit.
Well, the interesting part of this whole thing is their one debilitating weakness. The Drow know how vulnerable they are during daylight, so they typically plan raids that can be executed within the span of a single night. As a rule, this means their target must be no more than a few hours' march, 8 to 12 miles is typical, from an entrance to the Underdark. So their targets are limited.
Normally.
Yes, and ideally they'll have more than one return path mapped out. If an escape route is blocked, they can switch to another and get safely home. Heard a couple of the more forward members of the raiding party discussing their plans before they left, albeit with some magically enhanced hearing.
Of course.
I did get beat for that, because they did find out.
Yes. Good times.
No, terrible.
Once the raiders get inside their escape tunnel, they're usually safe. Opposing forces seldom pursue the Drow below ground for good reason. Beyond the light lies unmapped enemy territory where everything they meet is likely to be hostile. As we said, the Underdark. In special circumstances, however, such as one of the raiders' captors as a royal heir or the scion of a wealthy family, adventurers might be hired to mount a rescue mission. Otherwise, it's rare for any rescuers to follow the kidnapper's trail deep into the deadly darkness without becoming victims themselves. Which is an interesting point to make, because yes, I do believe there was actually, during our time there was a group of adventurers that thought themselves capable of, I guess, exacting a sort of vengeance upon the Drow for a recent excursion above ground, and ended up getting captured and sacrificed. I think like one of the leaders, who was this relatively stalwart, handsome human fellow, ended up being fed spiders that slowly ate from the inside out of him.
We're gonna have to talk about this, aren't we? Outside of class, I hope.
Do we? I don't know. Maybe I should just lock it up in a little box and keep it inside forever.
I can do that for you.
No, it's probably best that I don't. It's probably best that we have a talk about it. Yes.
Okay.
Alright, anywho. Along that similar vein, most of Lolth's personal realm is a layer of the abyss, known colloquially as the Demon Web Pits. And the reason for why Drow can be very, well, quite frankly, demonic is, well, they worship a demon prince. Far from being intimidated by their deities connecting to the abyss, the Drow revel in it, sometimes literally. Drow have respect for the power of demons, but they don't fear them the way most other mortals do. A Drow who calls upon a demon from the abyss into the Underdark wants something from it, typically a means of improving one's status or gaining leverage against enemies. A demon that answers the call wants something in return as well, an opportunity to spread carnage, to curry Lolth's favor, or to accomplish something more devious. And as long as both sides get what they want, these arrangements conclude without further incident.
Yeah, actually, I don't know about you, but I was, unfortunately, completely complicit in doing that for my house. I summoned a fairly, you know what I'm capable of.
Oh, yes, indeed.
I may have, lied a little, but I summoned a fairly low-grade demon.
Of course,
You know, had a contract.
Good on you for trying to, keep the
It only killed a handful.
potential repercussions.
It only killed a handful of people. It does know my name, though, so we might have a problem later on.
What, you didn't give it, your secret name or whatever? What are they called? What do they say when it's AKA your moniker?
Your code name?
Yeah, code name.
No. Well, I don't... You have one?
Yes. Of course we have one.
You have a field name?
Of course! I said this isn't my first rodeo as a slave, Elias. Of course you have a field name.
Why didn't you tell me?
I didn't think I had to. You're gonna tell these people your real name?
Well, I didn't really have a choice.
Yes, you did! Just literally any other name. Call yourself Fred, for Coralon's sake.
I mean, well, whatever.
Good lord.
Well,
That's gonna come back to bite us in the ass now.
maybe. It was, again, small. It was fine. It's like one of those ones that look like a fly. I can't remember the name of it right now. While this summoning went well, every so often a demon summoning goes badly. Perhaps the Drow intended to trap the demon into servitude but took inadequate precautions, or the demon was wilier than usual, or the call was answered by a being more powerful than the summoner could handle. Calling forth a demon and failing to rein it in is a capital crime in most Drow communities, as uncontrolled demon often spells disaster. Not only for the Drow who pulled it from the abyss, but the summoner's entire house. Hence why they trusted me. I think there was a little bit of a history of disaster. No, I think I might have been the most powerful caster they had access to.
Wow, that's
A demon is the highest form of slave a Drow house can own.
Can attest to that.
Yes. There's no better display of a house's power than a demon kept shackled as it serves its master. A few more potent ways of striking fear in an enemy's heart. Demons are also sometimes sought after as house guests, occasionally of a major the occasion of a major sacrifice, the dedication of a newborn daughter to Lolth, or even a lavish banquet. Takes on a great... I'm confused, but, well, they had them as guests.
Well, yeah, so essentially a lavish banquet takes on a greater significance and imparts more status when one or more demons are in attendance.
Did you get to see that? We didn't.
Oh, absolutely, all the time. Like I said, there was a lot of weird, dark, fornication things. Literally, I'm saying. In addition, any peaceful gathering of Drow and demons has the potential to descend into a riot of hedonism, even more raw and debased than the orgies Drow engage in on their own. Stories of such encounters have spread all the way to the surface world, where listeners dismiss them as exaggerations. But take it from me, they're not. Dragloths, the offspring of Drow and Glabrizu, serve as proof enough that when demons and Drow consort with one another, the result can be truly horrific. Seriously, I had to sit there and watch, sometimes join in, as my Drow matron, was going to town on a couple of different demons, just taking it and giving it.
We're going to have to talk about this.
I would rather not. I'd really rather not. I feel like this is the best way to express this in an educational environment where it's purely just educational purposes. There doesn't have to be any personal emotional attachment to it. It's completely neutral.
Okay.
And for educational purposes.
Okay.
Educational purposes.
Okay.
I will say, though, ironically enough, I did actually have a relatively, dare I say, good interaction and relationship with one of the shape-changing demons known as Yoklols, who are personal servants of Lolth.
Oh, good.
I swear it was very strange. I mean, I'll give a little background from what she herself kind of told me about the Yoklols. Apparently, they seem to be numberless in the demon web pits, but where they arise from is unknown. She wouldn't tell me that part, but they are spawned from Drow souls trapped in Lolth's web, or perhaps they spring directly from the Queen herself. Regardless of their origin, Yoklos respond to the will of Lolth alone, and no other demon or demon lord can command them. And because Yoklos can assume the form of a female Drow or a giant spider, and because they serve Lolth without hesitation, all Drow assume that some number of their friends and neighbors are actually Yoklos in disguise, spying for Lolth. And she totally, absolutely confirmed that. It was hilarious. She, gave me this, she didn't say it, but she said it without saying it. I kind of asked that, and she gave me, a wink with her one eye when she was, in her weird, demonic, goopy tree form. But yes, apparently, the higher a Drow's standing, the more worrisome this prospect becomes. After all, Lolth has little reason to care about those at the bottom of society, but those who lead her people and direct her worship must be closely watched to be sure they remain devout, unquestioning, and, most importantly, afraid.
Did you cater some sort of favor with Lolth?
I don't believe so.
I mean, at least not intentionally.
I mean, I
don't think your experience was normal.
I mean, I do know that, based off of my information that I gathered, Lolth usually brings favor to those that she believes help to further the Drow's, evolution to superiority, and usually from making things harder for them.
Literally or
both, I would assume.
Okay.
Just in whatever way that she feels is a way for them to. That's why she, for instance, one of the stories about Pt.2 is she actually favors him. Because as a Drow who is against her and the other Drow, he makes life harder for them, which she then believes will make them stronger from it. So, I don't know. Again, it was strange. The Yokelul, whose name was, I believe, Ariadne, she was very nice to me, actually. Which is like...
In like a dark elf sense?
No, like in an actual normal kind of sense. It was weird. She would bring me some food that wasn't, laced with all kinds of weird stuff in it or on it, or that she hadn't stepped on previously or whatever, or spit in, or, any other excrement potentially. She was, she would transform into her, Drow form, which again, super hot. Is kind of awesome. But then she would transform into a giant spider form, which I gotta admit was still kind of cool. And then her demon form, which was just all, goopy tree thingy with a one eyeball thing. But
also,
very
also cool.
Yeah, no. I gotta admit she could do a lot of stuff with those. I guess tentacles, bodies, and
good lord.
Yeah.
We should.
I didn't mean in a sexual sense, Elias. Good lord, get your head out of the gutter.
Isn't that what? I mean, get your head out of the underdark. Well, I guess we can talk a little bit about my side of things again. We'll be talking about some of those lower-born rebels, so to speak, as that was the main way I escaped and came back for you later on. The Drow Renegades, as Drow society is paradoxically extremely open-ended and extremely oppressive. All Drow have a chance, at least theoretically, to improve their station in life. And movement does occur through the hierarchy at all time, but naturally those in power are determined to put down any threats against them, and the penalty for insubordination is death. As things work out in practice, indentured Drow at the bottom of the ladder spend their lives laboring for another house's gain, and powerful Drow at the top of society spend their time trying not to be assassinated or framed for heresy, while clinging to the power and prestige they've wrestled from other houses. A dark elf who challenges another for superiority and fails, or who fails to respect the hierarchy in some other way, has just three options: agonizing death on an altar, virtual enslavement, or fleeing for their lives. Some of those who chose to run succeed in escaping into the Underdark despite the odds against them. Survival for a solitary Drow underground is nearly impossible. The main routes through the Underdark are dotted with Drow guard posts, and the backways are prowled by ropers, mind flayers, Durgar, and other killers.
Yeah.
To make matters worse, the Renegade's former house often offers a bounty that entices Drow assassins to take up the chase. For those who run, only a small fraction get to the surface, and even that achievement is no guarantee of safety because a lone Drow above ground is likely to be attacked on sight by surface dwellers. Now, that was kind of my experience. As it turns out, while doing some of my scrying and demon summoning and, general magics, I did notice...
Took a bit of a walk on the dark side there, bud.
It was a new experience for me.
I'm glad you got to let your hair down, so to speak, a little bit. You're always so stuffy and a bit, all about the good and justifiable honor and whatnot, but you really got to...
Much would have preferred a vacation. Yes. Either way, I did notice a couple of some interesting-looking people on the outskirts of the camps where I stayed at. And ended up being able to contact them and was eventually busted out by a group of rebels who took a handful of slaves, some equipment, goods, food.
That's nice.
And which actually led to me working with them to get you out Although really all I needed was just a moment of protection so I could figure out where you were, go in and get you, and come back. Hence why there were a couple Drow with us when we finally got out of the Underdark.
Yes, no, I did notice that, yes.
And we were able to get them to the town we were staying in, so they had people to work with as opposed to just dying once they got outside.
Yes.
Because those who do find their way to survive in the painful world of sunlight either live as recluses or find a community where their heritage and upbringing give them an advantage, such as an assassin's guild or a company of adventurers. Even in such cases, these traitorous Drow spend the rest of their lives looking over their shoulders, hoping to spy the black hood and flashing blade of a bounty-hunting Drow assassin before it's too late. And that was the general fear, that we'd been followed, or there was some way to track us, which both me and you did a very good job of making sure that wasn't the case. Like, you were a little out of it when I first got to you.
Yes, no, well, I may or may not have been. I was kind of in the midst, if I'm being honest, of maybe sharing a very nice, beautiful moment with Ariadne when you guys busted in and then began to burn her alive with, radiant magic and the like as she scurried away, and then you dragged me screaming and crying and pleading to leave me there.
You do realize that is kind of my job, right?
No, I understood. I understood after the fact. I must admit I was a little upset with you at the moment because, it was the first bit of light and kindness that I had received in a long time, and I really felt like we were connecting and we were really going to finally, cross that line and really, I was going to get to home base, but you cockblocked me, Blue. You cockblocked me, but that's okay. That's neither here nor there at this point. I'm sure I'll see her again someday, maybe. Just in another dimension and realm, so.
I hope for you that's not the case. I would say our escape was successful, and we learned a lot more than I wanted to.
Ah, Ariadne.
Okay, well...
So nice, so sweet. With your goopiness. You really knew how to fill up the hole in my heart.
Oh. I'm sorry, students. I think we'll take a little bit of a recess, maybe?
No, fine. Just give me a moment.
Okay. Well...
This is important. It's important for them to see, Real, true researching is all about being able to feel, acolytes. It's all about being able to understand, the truth of the situation. And I'll be honest, I didn't really have a time to kind of come to grips and terms with that whole situation. My experiences there, my relationship with Ariadne and Madame Zarathi. Because after that, we kind of ended up stumbling into another realm for our research, which kind of specifically helps to dull the emotional reaction to stuff.
Well, it wasn't on purpose, mind you. I was trying to go to the Feywild first. I thought we needed a little bit of a break, but no, of course that didn't work out for us either.
Yeah, no. We actually ended up inadvertently stumbling into a realm known as the Shadowfell.
Beautiful place in its own right.
Oh, absolutely.
It's dull and
maybe not
dark
beautiful,
and
but
quiet and serene and calm.
Void of any and all positive emotion, color, and joy.
Yeah, that's kind of how I felt when I used to work with the archive.
Good Lord, Elias.
It was wonderful.
Can't you just feel for once in your life? Just feel your emotions?
I felt a lot in the Underdark, let me tell you.
Okay. Well, regardless, this little mishap, as it were, turned out to actually be a bit fortuitous, for, we were intending to try and find a way here at some point to study another subrace of elves that are known to reside here, known as the Shadar-kai.
Yeah, we met quite a few, surprisingly.
They were very opening. They're very welcome.
We didn't mean to be there, but once we got there, they were very like, oh, come along, meet our...
They actually literally somehow found us right as we came through, as if they were waiting for us there the entire time.
After kind of going in there, I feel like they definitely knew we were coming. We didn't know we were coming. They did.
There was a raven that was just sitting, on this weird perch, and then Shadar-kai just standing there saying, oh, all right, on time. Follow me. And so we did, and we ended up staying with them, kind of moving between some of their groups and settlements every now and then, learning as much as we could. Again, they were very open, very forthcoming. They weren't completely different than the Drow. They were not violent, at least not openly to us. They killed a lot of bad stuff, though.
Yeah. They were very dull. That sounds mean.
They're neutral. They were very
Emotionally devoid?
They were neutral. They were very, it was muted. They were very muted people.
Yeah, there were people I could get along with.
They were a very muted race. You know, they didn't express a ton emotionally, at least,
They were curious.
no, and they did take steps to kind of express things, admittedly a bit depressing at times, but we did learn a lot from them.
Yeah, we compared some notes, talked about how long they'd been there,
and shared a bit of their history, like straight up. We had heard a little bit about them previously before venturing here, mostly kind of about their tie to the Raven Queen,
which was an interesting thing that we were looking to pursue anyway, so...
Indeed. From what we're able to surmise and get, for those who seek to know and understand the mysterious race of elves known as the Shadar-kai, must first delve into and unravel the enigma of the Raven Queen herself. For the story of her origin comes from the ancient history of the elves themselves. And it is said that she was once an elf queen, whose people loved her more than they loved even the gods. But her true name at this point has been lost to time. And so that was something that really captured our attention, is, the Raven Queen herself never really came up at first until that particular passage that we found, is that she apparently might be an ancient elven queen that has ties to both the original schism of the elves. Because specifically from fragments that have been found of her history, it was she who, when Corellon and Lulf were locked in conflict, tried to use the souls and magic of her people to elevate herself to godly status, thus salvaging the fractured pantheon of the elves. Afterward, however, the legend suggests she would attempt to implore Corellon and Lulf to come to their senses, but the information in these fragments is woefully incomplete, and the Queen's true motives were never fully understood.
As the Queen rose in power, many elves became inspired by her, freely offering their souls and their magical abilities to help her achieve her goal of ascension. This group of devoted followers called themselves the Shadar-kai, and they gathered others like themselves around their queen in hopes that once she achieved divinity, she would unify all the elves. The queen's plan was to use the souls of the Shadar-kai to forge a pathway through the Feywild to Arvindor, all while increasing her influence.
Now, see, that is some ambition that I can respect and get behind. That is quite the undertaking. Her methods being maybe a little grim, dark, as is kind of the nature of this particular discussion.
Well, anyone who,
so far.
No offense, anyone who uses the souls of their followers to achieve something, not my cup of tea.
I suppose. I mean, at the same offset, I suppose if they willingly gave of themselves for a cause they felt was, worth their lives, I feel like it might be a little disrespectful, disregarding to simply say that it wasn't worth it. I mean, I don't know. Bless you. It is difficult to say for certain the exact moral implications of the action she took, or even what her personal moral thoughts were on the matter.
And her followers that we talked to, there didn't seem to be a negative outlook. I mean, emotionally dull, yes, but not an evil one.
No, and they in fact seemed to actually legitimately love and worship her by, well, from what we could ascertain, by choice, and not necessarily by, their own, or by force, such as with Lulf, for instance. They aren't threatened or enslaved, it seems.
No, it's more of the bound. They chose the path, I think. From one of the older members, they used to call it a curse, to forever serve in her realm, the Shadowfell, but they don't feel that way as much anymore. They dwell outside kind of her fortress, the Fortress of Memories. It's not a place they go to willingly, as it is pretty terrifying.
Oh yeah, no, I can attest for that as well.
Yes.
And made a couple of expeditions into that place.
Yeah, not a fun one.
Didn't come out the same every time.
Yeah, no. And while you made that horrible mistake, I got to kind of sit in on some of their rituals and ceremonies, kind of looking back on the life they used to have. And the interesting one is, while the Shadar-kai are in the Shadowfell, their bodies and faces are old and withered, displaying the full effects of that magic. that strip them of their former elven beauty. To hide their visages, they often wear masks. I saw ones made of metal, wood, even ceramic. But even these coverings were kind of melancholic in appearance.
Yes.
When they're sent away from the Shadowfell to do the Raven's Queen bidding, they take youthful features similar to those of other elves, although their skin remains deathly pale. Now, they did show me what that looks like.
Yeah,
they could do it for a little bit in the Shadowfell, not for very long. But
Yes.
it was interesting. They're honestly quite beautiful in a sad way.
Oh yes, no, I feel like they are akin to another race of elves that we actually ended up interacting with after this. But we'll get to that at a later point. But overall, they are known as immortal servants of the Raven Queen first and foremost. For the Shadar-kai know that when they die, the Raven Queen captures their souls and returns them to the Shadowfell, where they are then resurrected to serve her yet again. Thus, they consider death to be a rather temporary condition, and many Shadar-kai care little for the physical shell they currently inhabit, seeing it as a temporary vessel that, will just simply be replaced upon its expiration. Shadar-kai know that those who come willingly to the Raven Queen's tower are there to beseech her for something, and thus they try to prepare such visitors for what they will have to face. The Queen's servants talk to any inquiry and venture about the gravity of emotion, how sorrow weighs on the soul as it travels through the Shadowfell, and how best to persevere in the Raven Queen's test. Yeah, now we had a conversation and talked about that for like weeks before I ever made even the first expedition, and that first expedition was still... Boy, that
You
was
never
a time.
quite told me how that went for you.
No, I did not.
Is that by choice?
Yes.
You were alive. You are a bit...
Was I?
I mean...
Am I, Elias?
I think so.
How can you even be sure of that? How can you be sure this is the same Alastor that went into that place? Maybe I'm a weird, strange changeling that came out and has been masquerading as in this entire time, fooling you all the while to gain all the secrets the Arcane Archive holds.
I mean, you kind of did bounce back once we went into the Feywild, so I'm kind of still thinking it's the same old you. A little bit worse for wear.
Who's to say?
I mean,
certain.
we do have, arcane wards.
Can we even trust anything our eyes tell us, Elias?
Well...
But regardless,
when the Raven Queen sees a soul or a piece of information she wants, she sends her ravens to alert the Shadar-kai. We saw this more than once or twice. Her minions then put their trust in these cryptic, cawing guides to lead them to where barriers are weakest, so they can slip across the plains to their destination. Once at their destination, the Shadar-kai watch and wait, looking for tragedies their queen wishes them to collect. Sometimes they are small, a spurned lover, a lost item, a betrayal, but some tragedies are much graver, a murder, a war, a diabolical bargain. To bring back a trinket for their queen, the Shadar-kai use their shadow magic. If a target is living, they magically infiltrate the person's mind and excise the desired bits of emotion. Or if the target is close to death, the Shadar-kai capture the whole soul to bring it back to the Raven Queen. I did see this while you were away on your mission.
I saw a lot of that in the Tower of Memories, actually. Just errant, loose souls moaning about as weird ravens seem to come and snatch them up every once in a while.
Yeah, I saw them bringing back their hall, so to speak, a couple times.
Yes, no.
It was not disconcerting, but a little
grim.
It was a little uncomfortable.
It was grim. It was grim to see.
Mostly...
I mean, I don't know what you saw when they brought it back outside, but inside you could hear a lot of the whispers and the chittering and the chattering of whatever the soul was going through at that time.
Just, for me, it feels like you lose a piece of yourself when stuff like that happens, and it was sad to see it, I guess, have to continue to exist somewhere else.
It was, it's hard to express exactly what I saw in there, to be perfectly frank. A lot of my senses were either dulled or topsy-turvied or confused, but either way, the biggest thing being I did come upon one particular aspect that was interesting. Shadar-kai are very interested in the magical silt at the bottom of the river Styx that holds the memories and identities of lost souls. Now, this is what I saw a lot of them kind of bringing and cultivating inside of the Fortress of Memories. Any adventurers who travel to the Nine Hells to procure a vial of this powder will likely draw the attention of the Shadar-kai, who will attempt to steal or barter for it. The adventurers might also bring a bit of the sediment as a gift to the Raven Queen, as you know that I did in fact just so happen to have a little vial that we had procured from the River Styx previously in one of our escapades to another realm as part of the Forgotten Realms, known as the Nine Hells. That was hard to get.
If I remember, I was unconscious for quite a lot of it.
You lost a lot of your memory that day, let me tell you, and probably for the best, I'm not gonna lie. Regardless, what she gives in return is never known ahead of time, but her boons come in many wondrous forms. The restoration of a lost soul, the rediscovery of a missing memory, or a glimpse into the forgotten knowledge of the ancients.
Did you get anything fun for it?
Oh, a gentleman never tells, Elias. A gentleman never tells.
Could you tell me later?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, just not in front of everybody. The acolytes are too young for this kind of thing.
Yeah, no, it's a little. I have to say,
Absolutely.
We kind of did like 2 harsh ones right in a row.
Yeah, no, I think it's it's important.
I mean, by the end of it.
Yeah, no, but
pretty cool place.
No, honestly, I didn't mind it. Again, one of our most, I would say, successful expeditions in terms of
killed.
We didn't even
shot
get, we didn't get attacked. We just got dreadfully, woefully, mentally scarred, attacked.
In a different way.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know about you, I spent a long time traveling outside of the palace. You really... It changes you. I went through a lot of stages.
Yeah.
Like, what am I doing here? What is the point of everything I'm doing? I'll never amount to anything.
It really challenges,
like honestly,
when
you were ready to go and they brought us to that little sliver of that gate to leave, I almost was like, why would I leave?
We might have to talk about that, actually. That seems weird that you want to stay there. Even the Shadar-kai themselves, there were plenty of them that were like, they would like to leave, but...
Yeah, but also, some of the elders, I mean, they would have taken me in, I think.
Maybe, but also, why would you want to stay exactly?
I haven't quite come to terms with why yet. I don't feel that way anymore, but at the time, I definitely did.
I feel like that's like the call of the plane itself, looking to literally steal your soul, maybe.
It was interesting.
Yeah, no. I'd be fine at visiting our Shadar-kai friends again, but just not for very long. A visit.
Maybe on the material plane.
Yeah, or I'd go to the Shadowfell for a little bit of time. I'd even go back into the Fortress of Memories. That place was wild. It really helped me to see a lot of stuff, and I'm always down for that. Apprentices, that is one experience besides, the whole enslavement of the Drow that I actually would recommend, just be ready.
Don't.
Just be ready. That's all. You go in there, you just know you're gonna see some stuff. It's like probably the biggest, trippy trip that you'd ever trip on. You know what I'm saying?
You really have to stop telling the students to go into life-threatening places.
If you're not... look, the heart and soul of every good researcher is one who has experienced much of the Omniverse, Elias. We agree on this.
Yes, but I was doing just fine before I met you.
You missed out is all I'm saying. You missed out on a lot of deep, heart, soul-ripping, sending, searching stuff going on, man.
Yeah, and I'll write it all down, so why would I want to go in there?
You never know. Look. But regardless,
yes.
At this point, we didn't go to one of my favorite locations on our trip.
I will have to admit, I quite enjoyed it as well.
I mean, it's just, we talked a little bit about this, and again, in our last lesson class. Right from the Shadowfell. Luckily, you see, the Shadowfell is actually in the world of the Forgotten Realms. They are in a very kind of tight morality kind of balancing scale, known colloquially as kind of like there's the forces of chaos, forces of law, forces of good, and forces of evil, and then the neutral, everything in between. And essentially, the Shadowfell is definitely known to be more of the force of kind of law and neutrality, essentially. Whereas its inverse is known as the Feywild, which is a force of chaos and neutrality. Mm-hmm. Both evil and good in both of these places suffuse it and have equal kind of power and standing there. But the Shadowfell is definitely much more about law, as the Feywild is much more about chaos. And luckily we were able to relatively easy get to the Feywild, ironically, even from the Shadowfell itself.
Which was interesting. I didn't think that would be possible, but...
It is strange, but there seems to be, because they are both concurrent with the material plane, that there are still spots and pieces that sync up with each other, albeit probably like chaotically, or not chaotically, but conflictingly so.
Yeah, we did have to do a little bit of coercing ourselves.
A little bit. It was not the, the most stable transition, I would say. It was almost like all the atoms in our body, like, were ripped apart momentarily as we passed from this lawful neutral plane into this chaotic neutral plane.
Yeah, it was quite beautiful when we came.
It was almost like if you would, like, have different animation styles, right?
Oh.
It's like you have one that's like very like edgy, dark, grim, you know,
and all of a sudden everything was
dynamic,
bright. Yeah.
and then everything was like all cartoonish,
brightly
and like
colored.
you know, brightly colored and the like. It was a very interesting shift.
We walked in and it was like, fairies and sylvan creatures and
light, vibrancy, saturation up the wazoo.
And through what we've studied beforehand, I guess this is widely considered to be the closest realm to the elven realm of the Arvandor.
It's true.
And while we
talked a bit about that before.
Yeah,
this was the first realm that the primal elves retreated to after their banishment from Arvandor. And we talked a little bit about the specific subrace of elves who stayed here, unlike the rest who left off to the other planes to live. And that race is the eladrin or eladrin.
Yeah. And while the people who aren't eladrin. They've never really said.
Eladrin.
Either way, the thing that we had an advantage here is that we knew the difference between the Feywild and Arvandor.
Yes.
Arvandor being a good plane, the Feywild being in the middle.
As we said, neutral.
Yeah,
but chaotic as
we saw a couple spots that were quite pleasant, a couple spots that definitely were a little bit more insidious. But all in all, a very pleasant experience for me at least. We saw a couple different kinds of elves, but the most prevalent would be the eladrin. They are kind of...
eladrin.
By their own accord, closest in form and ability to the first generation of the primal elves after the schism. Some could pass for high elves, but most are distinct in their appearance as eladrin.
Oh yes, no. I mean, there's a pretty obvious difference between, for sure. While they do also have the normal appearance of, being rather slender, with hair and skin color determined by the season with which, they feel the closest affinity. And their eyes often glimmer with fey magic. And what we mean by the hair and skin color determined by the season in which they feel the most affinity is literally for eladrin. They change and shift, not just their personal color, but even some of their abilities and their emotional state, based off of whatever, as I said, season they feel most affinity to. So either autumn, winter, summer, or spring.
And it was quite a difference. You could catch them...
Starkly so.
You could catch them in high spirits and this wonderful curiosity, and...
spring.
Yeah, you could catch them with this just such a sad state, and...
Quite. Remember when I said before that we had found a particular elf that's very similar to, like, some of the Shadar-kai, or even some of the Drow, who are just very melancholy, very sad or cold? This is what I was referring to. The winter eladrin are known to be literally rather, giving the cold shoulder, just being very somber, being very just kind of in on themselves, and a little bit of a sorry sap at times. Summer eladrin, on the other hand, are kind of known as the warriors of the eladrin. They are hot-blooded. They are usually rather angry, hostile. They are the ones that are most proficient in combat abilities and skills and the like. Though, unlike the others, they're not as innately connected to their magic, interestingly enough. Both the spring, the winter, and lastly the autumn elves are all very naturally prone to being more in touch with the magic of both their season as well as the Feywild itself.
Yeah, and once we talked with them and kind of got past the fact that they definitely looked at us like, who are you? We're definitely better than you. A little bit haughty for my take. Alastor was loving it.
I mean, I appreciated that, it was refreshing. They weren't quite as assholey, like, as High Elves were, but also kind of even more so in a different way. Like, it was weird, because they also looked down on High Elves as well.
Someone has to.
Yeah, it's also because, but it's like, I kind of get where they're coming from in a sense of like, hey, they are the closest to the primal elves, they don't really have as much of a weird simpage thing going for Coralon and the rest.
They kind of have confidence in their own forms. And once we introduced ourselves and they got to understand why we were there, they told us kind of how they got to be where they are.
Sure.
Their exposure to the Feywild, I mean, over
a century or more, usually.
For a lot of them, it was much longer.
It hastens the onset of the remembrance significantly among most elves. So, how we talked about how, elves feel the need to kind of go back to Arvend or whatever. They get that much quicker than most elves.
Oh no, they didn't get it. They don't get it the same way. In fact, even I had it in the couple of days that we were staying there, but they seemed to think that was strange.
That's true. They don't feel it in the same way is the thing.
But then again, they weren't quite sure what elves we were.
Yeah. But it is because of their link to the primal elves that eladrin do tend to be far haughtier, as we said, than others. They're proud of their heritage and equally proud of their ability to thrive in the Feywild, a land full of threats that would overwhelm and destroy weaker creatures. Some eladrin trade haughtiness for a tender kindness toward their elf cousins, knowing that many elves have never felt the ecstasies of life amid the Fey, and years spent near the ancient shrines and other glories created by the primal elves who arrived first in Fairy. And these kind of eladrin take a special pleasure in introducing their realm to others. That was my personal experience. I had a lot of those people who were very much open to showing me all of this amazing stuff and all of these things. They're very open and free with their love, their sexuality, their knowledge and information. It was a great time. I mean, honestly, you should see some of these places. I mean, eladrin cities represent, honestly, I would even say, the pinnacle of elven architecture.
It was quite beautiful.
Their soaring towers, arching bridges, and gracefully filigreed homes are a perfect blend of construction, natural elements, and magic-inspired motifs. Streams and waterfalls, gardens and copses, and structures of stone and wood are commingled in ways that are original and yet completely natural looking.
It was like nothing I'd ever seen.
Even amongst the wood and high elves, it was like a blend. It was like a seamless blend between the both, which was just
They took the nature and just this wonderful architecture that it's not even comparable.
I mean, honestly, I think we were able to confirm that it seems that eladrin culture is older than any other elven civilization. And it's almost the most decadent. Like, good lord, the feasts, the absolute feasts that we were subjected to, honestly. And it's such a stark contrast to all the stuff in the Underdark, and then also in the in the Shadowfell. It was, it was quite the change, honestly. Yeah. Most elves, however, are impetuous to some extent, but eladrin are known for their fickleness, interestingly enough. Many of them,
it was a constant.
Yeah.
I mean, they would change their minds spur of the moment, never give any reason for it, and their justice, the system of justice in the city that we were at was weird. It was harsh, but mild, and it was almost like it was depending on their mood. But we did get very far purely on flattery.
Oh yes, no, you're welcome for that. I can dole it out when I need to, and they were exceedingly susceptible to it.
I mean, even I got looks, which is unusual.
You did, honestly. I mean, it was, like I said, we had a good time. At least, I think of all of the trips there, that probably was my favorite. I don't know. Honestly, all of the trips were great and interesting in their own ways. This was obviously just the most, pleasure center and focused, I would say. Like, it was just non-stop, just
fun,
pleasure, whatever your heart's desire, here you go, Which ironically also had an interesting kind of dark undertone to it, though, too, at times. Like, it was a bit, they for sure were borderline, if not, like, totally over the line of an overindulgence at times.
Yeah.
That I was noticing.
It was weird. So, obviously, we had seen some research of the eladrin culture from those on the material plane.
Indeed.
We did our research before going there, before doing any of these trips. And, you know, a lot of scholars believed that it's all of these traits were influence of the Feywild, and
Which makes sense.
they spend us, you know, and like they point out that the eladrin who spend a significant amount on the material plane still have those attitudes, but they kind of lose its
It's
poignancy.
to a far lesser degree from what we were
Yes.
able to ascertain, as well as from the notes that we were able to take from some of the other researchers, and it makes sense to me.
It does.
It's like
It's
a
almost-
sound theory.
It's almost like they have this personality that is kind of it's coalesced with their realm,
Absolutely.
and it just magnifies it.
I mean, the way that just think about it. The such intense shift from being in the Shadowfell, for instance, where everything, all our senses seemed dull and muted in a lot of ways. Tastes, touch, sound, smell, sight, all of it was just muted. Whereas then, as soon as we got to the Feywild, it was almost like all of that was kicked up by 20. Like where everything, like taste, touch, sound, sight, everything, it was magnified to its like an extreme degree. So I mean, who wouldn't want to indulge in that if given the opportunity?
The weirdest part for me, and we've talked about this before, was the talking with some of the eladrin once we kind of settled for a little bit. While they have the closest connection to Corlan and Arvindor, they don't really care for it so much.
They have very little affinity for them.
Yeah,
They do not worship or offer much respect or care for them.
Well, they don't want to end back up with Corlan again, but rather stay in the Feywild.
Yeah.
Because they've spent so long there at this point.
No.
Well, they're almost kind of melded with it.
But I think this brings up another interesting theory that we were talking about before. Again, about the nature of the realms and the planes themselves, where who would want to leave the Feywild when your senses and everything that you are and your pleasure, your excitement is turned up to the umpteenth degree? I mean, after...
It's intoxicating, really.
It's absolutely intoxicating, which can be, again, a rather negative overindulgence thing. But for instance, I mean... many of the eladrin believed that should they excel in life throughout a series of incarnations and other forms and ways, they can eventually come back even as a member of the Seelie or Unseelie courts themselves, or, in extreme cases, even as an archfey.
Which we did meet a few
Yes, those were
interesting experiences.
encounters, yes. Very interesting encounters indeed.
I mean, I was never harmed in the physical sense.
Not that you remember.
Oh.
Yes, that will have to be a story for another time, class. There were quite a bit.
Is that why there seems to be pieces missing?
Yeah. Again, we'll talk about it later, bud. I'm writing up a draft and for the curriculum for that particular lesson.
Is that why my notes just stop and then start again?
Yeah, I kept the notes going as well.
No, but in my notes.
Yeah.
There's like a hole.
Yeah. There was some interesting stuff going, and this is, if nothing else, class, this is a testament to, regardless of how fantastic and amazing the Feywild appears to be at first glance, there was always an underlying extreme danger here. It messes with your senses. It clouds your judgment with the vast, just overwhelming of pleasure and possibility that it offers. And you might end up getting a bit lost in the sauce, as it were.
Damn it.
Yeah, no, it's okay, bud. You're fine. You're fine now, for the most part.
I mean, fine is an interesting word to use after the 3 places we visited.
Yeah, honestly, I think that's probably pretty good, actually. I think being fine,
I mean...
after that triple threat, like,
We ended up pretty unscathed.
I think we came out as well as anything could be expected to after all of that. You know, we're pretty hardy despite our, wizard natures and the like. But we've been around the block at this point once or twice, and boy, it was a hell of a ride, that particular expedition.
I mean,
into the Forgotten Realms.
if who's gonna do it? If we're not gonna do it,
Yes. I mean, we're here for it. That's why That's also why we, would like as much funding as we can for the Arcane Archive to do this kind of expeditionary work, so that lovely, amazing souls like yourself don't have to risk their hides, their memories, and their dignity and pride to get all of the knowledge and information, the truth, as it were, for you. But I do believe that that is all the time that we have today for today's lesson on the denizens of the plains and the elves of the Forgotten Realms, part 2, as it were. Once again, class, thank you all so much for coming and attending. We hope you enjoyed today's topic and lesson, and if you haven't already, go back and review lesson 1. Again, all of this information will be important leading up to the final test, so to speak. But please do enjoy yourselves for the rest of your day, and we will see you next time in class in the Arcane Archive. Class dismissed. No, seriously, I mean, you're fine. You're fine. It's
I mean,
your memory was, maybe a little bit foggy, but is that really such a bad thing in return for, all of your extremities and limbs and, soul pieces, fragments?
not all of them, but yeah, I mean,
the important ones.
I'm pretty well off. I can still write. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
My sight is a little off.
No, that's fine. Just wait. You can get spectacles. That's fine.
I didn't exchange anything, did I?
We'll talk about it.
Okay.
We'll talk about it later.